Hi everybody, welcome to my Suburban Oasis. My name's Soleil and I garden in mid-Michigan, and this is a Zone 5B garden. So I'm really excited today to bring you a video about all the hydrangeas that I have in my garden or that are planted in pots. We'll talk a little bit about what zones they are good in, what size they grow to, and a little bit about the growing conditions, as well as whether or not you can plant them into pots. All right, let's get started. So we're starting with the Incredible Hydrangea. This is a hydrangea that was designed by proven winners in the hopes that it would have sturdier stems than the Annabelle Hydrangea. So it is a modified variety of the Annabelle Hydrangea, and it works out really well. It does have very nice stiff stems. One of the things I would note at the beginning of this video is that we've just had some really good rain for about 2 days, so it is an excellent time actually to see the hydrangeas and how they perform after heavy rain in regards to drooping. The Incredible Hydrangea is a plant that can be grown in full sun. However, I have heard from many folks in the south that if you have these planted, you may want to have them with afternoon shade. They can also grow in part shade or part sun, and these right now are in what I would consider to be full sun. I'm standing on the northeast side of them, but they get a great deal of sun because there is no protection, as you can see, from any trees or anything overhead. These are a native plant. The Annabelle Hydrangea is a native plant. They are called Hydrangea arborescens, which is also referred to as a smooth hydrangea. And so they produce these beautiful, beautiful mop heads. These do attract some pollinators. However, I would not say that they are the most prolific pollinator attractors. This was planted in my garden last year, and I actually bought just one shrub. I split it in half, divided it into two, and planted it in these two separate spots. And this will get 4 to 5 feet tall and wide. And it's doing really well here, and I think that this is an easy one to also put into a pot if you wanted to grow it in a pot, because it is hardy down to zone 3 and it is hardy up to zone 8. The blooms on this plant do start out very white, and then they kind of turn to this beautiful limey color, and they are quite fluffy, very round, and very beautiful, and I only anticipate it getting better next year. I do have a couple also that I cut off the sides of these, so let me show you what it looks like when you propagate this. So this is a very small propagation, and please note that many plants are allowable for home propagation, but not for propagation and giving to others or for selling. So this one is a very small root that I cut off the outside of the plant at the end of the season last year and just planted into the ground. And it's doing really well. Next year it will probably be quite a bit larger than this. And this hydrangea you want to cut back by 1/3 in the spring. So just leave everything on over the winter. It actually provides for a very nice and beautiful look, especially if you get snow on your hydrangeas. I do have 2 of these that I did through propagation of just cutting off very small sections of a plant with root. I do have one that I actually did from a small cutting, and I'll show you that next. It's fairly difficult to see this one, but this was simply a cutting of a branch that I laid down on its side and covered with soil. And this is a very small growth that I'm getting this year, but it will grow on into be a full Incredible bush. Next step, and also in the smooth hydrangea category or the Hydrangea arborescens, we have the Seaside Serenade series, and this is the Harbor Hydrangea that is by Monrovia. And this one was also bred to be an improved version of the Annabelle Hydrangea, so again, a native cultivar, which can be important to folks. And it has very large leaves. It has incredibly large bloom heads, but I do find that it does flap a little. So I have gotten some supports for it, and I just love it though. It's definitely worth having the supports for it. I've only had this one in the ground for a short period of time, and you can see there is one stalk that is very strong and standing upright. So I do believe that over time, this one may continue to get even sturdier. And I did cut it back a little too hard this last year, just trying to tidy it up a little bit. So that may have contributed to the amount of flap that you're seeing right now after a couple of days of heavy rain. Similar to the incredible hydrangea, this Harbor Hydrangea is full sun, and it can also grow in partial sun. Again, if you grow these in a very hot climate, I do suggest that it gets afternoon sun. These hydrangeas face east, so they definitely get the eastern sun, but then there's also not a lot of protection from the south, so they do get some southern exposure as well. So quite a bit of sun, and they definitely like a lot of organic matter to be added to the soil to ensure that they have enough water. I would say that about just about any type of the hydrangea arborescens is that you don't want to plant them in a dry site because they do like to be watered regularly. They do like a moist soil. So these will get about 4 feet tall and wide. Again, very similar to the Incredible, but you can see the heads on these actually have a little bit more undulation, a little bit more interest in them, and the leaves are very, very large and almost heart-shaped. So I really love these. I think they're a beautiful plant. They come out very nice and beautifully white and turn to this more limey color as they age. These can also be cut and used as dried flowers in the house. They can also be cut as regular flowers in the house as well. It blooms all summer long. These are again hardy from zones 3 to zone 8. And so another good one that you can plant into a pot as long as they get nice regular water. Remember, if you plant these into a pot though, that you want to make sure that they are in a zone. If you're in a zone 5 like me, this is perfect because it goes hardy to zone 3. So at least 2 zones below the zone that you are in to ensure that they make it through the winter every year. These are rabbit resistant, which also can be a good thing. They are definitely not deer resistant though. So if you have deer in your area, do know that the deer will enjoy these quite a bit. Speaking of deer, there goes one running through the back right now. And so next up, I thought I would show you the Annabelle Hydrangea, which is the plant that both of these were bred from. And this plant has the exact same growing conditions, pretty much the exact same size and hardiness, but it has been said to be tending to, it has been said to tend to flop after a rain. Now you can see that mine is not flopping. I don't know why. I do believe it's because it's in a protected area. I'm not positive. But so if you look up, I just want to show you so you can see there are some trees that are above it. So this is definitely a part shade area and fairly protected, so it may not have just gotten as heavy of rain, and also because it's not in full sun, the blooms may have been slightly smaller and therefore not collected as much rain. This one does bloom white again, but you'll see that's a beautiful lime color that it has. A really showy and gorgeous shrub to have in your garden. I have really enjoyed having it here. It lights up this shade border, and I definitely recommend having some smooth hydrangeas in your garden. All right, next up, we're going to be moving to the Panicle hydrangeas. So these are Hydrangea paniculatas, and this one is the hydrangea called berry white. And berry white can take full sun to part shade, It also grows from zone 3 to zone 8, and it is about 6 to 7 feet tall by 4 to 5 feet wide. So it's probably going to get quite a bit bigger, but I'm really excited about it really filling in to hide and kind of make softer this corner of the house. This berry white hydrangea is a real stunner in terms of the upright stems that it has and the color that it turns. It starts out white, and it starts usually in July, and it goes all the way to this really dark pink. And the differences in the color will definitely depend on your climate, as I understand it as well. In the south, without the cool nights, sometimes you may not get as dark of a color or even a change in the color. But these are definitely beautiful. They're gorgeous as a cut flower. They're gorgeous as a dried flower. But similar to the Hydrangea arborescens, you will only cut these back by a third, and you can leave the blooms on over the winter and then cut them in the early spring to late winter. Sometimes when I want to propagate a plant, I will simply use those cuttings in late March and stick them directly into the soil, and they will root out for me. So another gorgeous plant. Simply love this one. It's an amazing specimen, and it turns fairly early in the season in terms of the colors, and just the deep, dark, rich pink is a stunning combination with these millennial alliums that are here. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about the strawberry Sundae hydrangea. This is also a hydrangea paniculata. It is really gorgeous. It will only get to about 4 to 5 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. So it's about as wide as it's going to get, but it will definitely pick up some height over time. And this one is also hardy down to a zone 3, up to a zone 8. And the nice thing about hydrangea paniculatas is that they do not require as much water as a hydrangea arborescens. They do really like the full sun though. They say that they can take part shade, and I do have several of these, so I will show you what they look like in part shade. The more sun that they get, the bigger the panicles and the more prolific the blooming will be on these. And again, they don't require quite as much water, so I do love these. They're an incredibly low maintenance plant to have in your landscape, and they do provide a very bright, light white color when they first come out, and then as they fade into these beautiful pink colors, it's gorgeous for the fall. So this one has a very distinct lighter pink color, and I absolutely love having the different varieties in my garden. So let me show you some others that have different aspects, but this one faces west and also gets the southern exposure as well. This is also a strawberry Sundae hydrangea, and you can see that while it's starting to change color, it is not changing quite as quickly as the other one because it gets a little bit more shade. This one also faces the west, but the sun is protected by the house for part of the day, so it primarily gets just some southern exposure, and then it also has a little protection from this arborvitae in front of it. The bloom production on these can also be affected by water, so if you have a really dry area, they may want a little bit more water just to have bigger blooms. So we have some new blooms that are coming out on the back that I thought I would show you. These are a little bit limey when they first come out, but then they turn white rather quickly. And after they turn white, then they put on their pink color. So you can see that this one is actually a little bit behind the other one, which has pretty much got all of its blooms on it already. And this one is still putting out blooms and finishing. So it can give you a little bit more of a spread of the season depending on where you have these planted. This is another strawberry Sundae hydrangea that is planted facing north. So this primarily just gets light from the north, but you can see it has quite excellent bloom coverage. It did get some browsing from the deer, so that's why it's missing some, but otherwise you can see that the panicles are getting large. And this one has been in the ground for a couple years longer than the other two, so you can see how the blooms become bigger over time. Here in the front yard we have some smaller Bobo Hydrangeas. Bobo Hydrangeas are also Panicle hydrangeas, and they are smaller blooms and they have smaller florets as well. It's incredibly reliable. It is also hardy in zones 3 to 8, and it starts out very white and then they fade to pink. And they have a very lacy-like foliage that I think is incredibly pretty. It's daintier than some of the others, and it will grow up to 2.5 to 3 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. So these are a very nice, more compact hydrangea if you don't have as much space. Wider than they are tall, and they will bloom all summer. And again, because they're that paniculata, they really like the sun and they're incredibly easy to grow. These are also not deer resistant. The deer do like to eat them, so if you plant these and have deer, I do recommend that you protect them with some liquid fence or some other type of spray. You can grow these in part shade. These are facing north and have some protection behind them from the orange rocket barberries, but they do get quite a bit of sun. I'll show you two others that we have that actually face the south. So these two face the south. They have a little bit of protection overhead. I planted these last year, so these have not reached their full maturity yet. And I do expect that many of them will have bigger bloom stalks similar to these in the back next year. Hydrangeas do like some fertilizer. I tend to only give them a little bit of organic fertilizer early in the spring, but I also mulch every year with a couple inches of mulch around the base of the plant. That helps to ensure that there's plenty of organic matter always breaking down into the soil and feeding the soil so that the soil can then in turn feed the plant. This is the little lime paniculata hydrangea, and this is a smaller form of the limelight created by proven winners, and it is also hardy from zone 3 to 8. This one is about a moderate size hydrangea, and it grows about 3 to 5 feet tall and wide. This one has been in the ground just for 1 year. I planted it last fall, and so this is its first full year here. As you can see, it's doing fairly well, and this one is tucked in to a corner of my garden where it gets probably what I would consider to be part shade. So although it faces west and south, there are trees to the south. Let me show you here so you can see it is protected by these trees. And so it primarily only gets the late afternoon western sun in this corner, and it's doing great. I definitely, again, continue to mulch this and make sure that it has a little bit of fertilizer in the spring, and that's pretty much my routine for all of my hydrangeas. Again, you just leave the bloom stalks on over the winter, cut it back by about 1/3 in late winter to early spring. This one's really special though because the blooms come out lime and they actually stay lime until they turn shades of pink. So the color that they are right now actually stays, and it actually becomes even a little bit more limey for me. I'm sure it differs depending on your zone and how much cold or heat they get, but it's really beautiful. Now what I will say is that I also have this in a pot and in a couple other places in my garden, so I'd like to show you those because they definitely perform differently depending on the aspect of the site where you plant. So this is also a little lime hydrangea, and the blooms have opened much bigger and it is in much more sun. This definitely gets the south and west sun and also some of the eastern sun. It's wide open on my deck and it is in a pot, and this is overwintered. So I believe this is its second year in this pot, and it stays smaller because of the fact that the roots don't have as much room to spread, and it has been a really easy care perennial to have in a pot. So I definitely recommend trying out hydrangeas in pots if you are looking for something to do that with. And I recommend over the arborescens or the smooth hydrangeas using the paniculatas because they do take less water. Definitely during some of the more dry spells this summer, I would say that we would get some drooping on the arborescens hydrangeas that I talked about earlier, but not on the panicle hydrangeas. So these hydrangeas are really sturdy and they do much better through drier conditions. This is the third area in which I have planted little lime, and you can see they're back here and they get eastern sunlight only. So that's just the morning sun. So these are much later to bloom. They're just starting to put their blooms out. But as these get larger, I think that they will get more sun, and that will definitely enhance the amount of blooms that we get from them. But they're going to light up this corner quite a bit. Now we're going to move into talking about some of the paniculatas that have more of a lace cap form. So this one that we're looking at right now is the Pinky Winky, and this is the Hydrangea paniculata still. But the difference is that you have more of these small flowers in between each of the blooms, and that means that the pollinators like these a lot. So if that's important to you, I would definitely say that we are at the part of the video where we're going to be showing some of the different kinds that you may be more interested in planting in your garden. These are good in sun to part shade, again hardy from zones 3 to 8. These do get a little bit bigger. They get about 6 to 8 feet tall and wide, and they bloom all summer. And as you can see, this one is starting to have some of that beautiful pink at the bottom of the blooms, and all of the flowers have not yet opened yet. So this is probably about a third of the way through its bloom cycle, and these will get much bigger. Now, if you are in the south or in a warmer zone, these will flower and begin flowering a little earlier in the season for you than they do for me. I also have a tree form of this. So this one, again, it faces east, so it gets the eastern sun, but it also does get some southern sun as it reaches around the front of the shed. So this is the area that faces south. So this one is definitely further along than my tree form. Let's go take a look at that one. So here we have the tree form of the Pinky Winky Hydrangea, and you can see that the panicles are a little bit smaller, and that's because this one actually gets a little bit less sun. While it looks like it is in the open, it's primarily facing north, and then it does get some sun right through this break in the trees. But otherwise, I would say that this is probably a part shade to part sun aspect for this. So you can see that it is, again, a little bit smaller in terms of the panicle size because it gets less sun, but also it's just not quite as far along, so it hasn't put out quite as many of the pink changes as the other one has. There's just barely some starting at the bottom of some of the blooms. These are gorgeous. These are really the only ones that have cone shape. In fact, they remind me a little bit more of an oak leaf hydrangea bloom, but they're simply gorgeous. And again, they really do a good job of attracting pollinators if you want to, make a point of ensuring that you're able to attract them into your garden. Here we have the quickfire hydrangea. The thing that this one is notable for is for being an early bloomer. So this one definitely blooms earlier in the season, and it is, again, a paniculata hydrangea, but it does have more of that lace cap look with the open blooms. And you can see there's a variety of different blooms on here in terms of the age, because some of them have been out for a couple of months now, and others have just more recently formed and are white and Still definitely attracting some pollinators. This one gets 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. So again, a little bit larger, about the same size as the Pinky Winky hydrangea, and also hardy in zones 3 to 8. So this one has been in the ground for several years, and I got this random really tall spike that I wanted to leave, but I could have cut that off if I wanted to keep it in a shrub shape. Let's take a look at one other that I have down in a different aspect. So this one is also a quick fire, but I planted this one last year, so you can see it's a little bit smaller. This one gets sun only from the west primarily, maybe a little bit from the south as well. And so because this one has had some protection from the sedum in front of it, since it's so small, it has not changed quite as quickly as the other. But I anticipate that this one will be on the same schedule as the other one that I showed you just before this. Absolutely beautiful, tons of pollinators again. I mean, these are just swarming with them on a nice sunny day. Now I have taken a cutting of this and rooted it, so let me show you what that looks like. This one is just getting the western sun and faces more of a north, and so you can see how nice and soft the color is on this bloom, and it's just gorgeous. But this one is a cutting that I took 2 years ago, so this is its second year in the ground. Last year I put it in the ground in the end of March, and it took really well, and this is what we have so far. Next year I think this one's going to put on quite a bit more growth. Alright, next up we have this hydrangea in a pot that is right at the top of my list in terms of favorites. Isn't this stunning? Just the deep dark color that it turns is amazing, and this is a fantastic pollinator attractor as well. This is the Diamond Rouge Hydrangea. This one is actually by First Editions, and I've seen them at Lowe's this year as well, so I definitely highly recommend this one. The color is stunning. Again, the pollinator attracting elements of this plant are great. I have seen butterflies on it and any type of bee or pollinating bug that you can imagine, and it's just fun to watch and gorgeous, just beautiful. So this one is also hardy from zone 3 to 8, and it grows 4 to 5 feet high and 3 to 4 feet wide. But look at those blooms. So stunning. And this goes again in full sun to part shade, and it is a paniculata hydrangea. So I'm going to show you one other of this type that I have, and it's definitely not as far along. This one gets complete and utter full sun. It gets it from the east, from the south, from the west. It's just wide open. And this has overwintered in the pot successfully for me here in zone 5B. So this is what it looks like in the garden right now. This one has been planted just since last fall, so I've had this one not as long, so it hasn't gotten as big. And I'm anticipating that next year it's going to get much bigger, and as it comes out from the arborescens, I think it's going to get more sun and it's going to put on more blooms and be even happier. So I can't wait to see this one take on more growth next year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the fall color in this area. So this is my vanilla strawberry hydrangea, and this is also one at the top of my list. This one is also done by First Editions, and the color that it takes on is simply gorgeous. It's incredibly showy. The blooms on it are huge. They start out really creamy white and they turn to this bright pink or strawberry red, which it's very similar to the color of the Diamond Rouge Hydrangea as well. But this can be grown in sun to part shade, again zone 3 to 8, and it is just gorgeous. I love having it in the garden by this fountain. I think that it provides an amazing backdrop, and typically the stems are quite sturdy. As I indicated before, we have just had quite a bit of rain, and they really take on a lot of the wet because it just gets absorbed into those giant panicles. And this can get 6 to 7 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide, so it's about at its mature height right now. Simply magnificent. Love it. Next up we have the Firelight Hydrangea. This one I got last year in the fall, and I kept it and overwintered it in this pot, and it's doing great. I actually separated it into 2 shrubs, so I'm thinking about planting one of them out into the landscape and then keeping the other one in this pot next year. But this one also gets pretty large, 6 to 8 feet tall and wide, and again hardy in zone 3 to 8. And it just has beautiful, beautiful color on it. It started turning earlier than some of the others that I have. It's still putting out more new blooms. You can see buds on it over here. And then this is what the new hydrangea panicles look like as they begin to turn to pink. Very, very white. Not as creamy or limey as many other colors, so if you like that very clean look, these are for you. And they have very, very big florets. Really, really gorgeous. And again, super easy care. What we're looking at right now is the Peegee hydrangea tree, and this is one that I got on clearance, and I'm super excited to say that I love it. This one also has a bit of an open growth to it. It changes color really soon in the season, much sooner than any others that I have in my garden. I would say it's right around the same time or maybe even before the quick fire. And this one is blooming all summer and fall, and it's just gorgeous. Now you can grow this as a shrub as well, but it does get rather large. So this is one that over time has become less popular for nurseries to put out, but if you see one as a tree form, I think it's amazing and highly recommend that one. Last but definitely not least, I want to show you my jet stream hydrangea. This is an oak leaf hydrangea, or the Hydrangea quercifolia, and this one is also grown by First Editions, and it can take full sun. I have one out in my front sun bed and part shade. So this one is definitely in the shade, and this can get 5 to 6 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide. The blooms on this, I have not gotten many of them yet, but I'm just starting to get some of them on my one in the full sun, and I'm excited to see them. This is just their second year in the ground, so I think as they mature, we'll get more of those. And I'm really looking forward to it because the giant panicles on those blooms are gorgeous, and we'll put a picture up for you. Also, we'll put a picture up of the gorgeous foliage in the fall because it turns a stunning deep burgundy, and it just adds so much in terms of the aspect of color in your garden in the fall. So definitely several seasons of interest for the oak leaf hydrangea. And here's another one that I have as well. And the leaves just look like oak leaves, so that's beautiful. They're very large. These are a little bit more deer resistant than the other hydrangeas because the leaves are kind of, the texture of the leaves is not smooth, but again, simply gorgeous. Highly, highly recommend finding an oak leaf hydrangea that you like, even if it's just for the fall color and the foliage. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on my hydrangea tour. I certainly hope you enjoyed it and learned a little bit about how easy they are to care for, and that you found 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 that you want to put in your garden. If not, there's lots of others that are out there, so check them out. Let me know what your favorites are down in the comments. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Bye!